If you wake up from a hike the next day and your quads are absolutely cooked, if your upper calf is absolutely cooked, I guarantee you that this is not working very well. Utilizing this little drill and this exercise will help your brain pattern a little bit more glute and help that glute to drive you forward and get more forward propulsion from that huge muscle, rather than relying on the knee to get you forward in space. Knee pain can be a really complex thing to figure out, even as a physiotherapist or someone that is experiencing knee pain, especially when you're hiking. There are many things that could be causing that. So rather than me saying, here is 3 exercises that are generally good for the knees, I would rather teach you principles, and principles can be applied to many different situations. And the principle that I want to share with you is hip extension before knee extension. This is something that is pretty well known in the athletic world. It's pretty well known in terms of the speed development sprinting world. And it is essentially, in my mind, the way I think about it is it's a concept or a biomechanical pattern to utilize more glute rather than using the knee as a way to force us forward in space. So first, I think it'll be useful to explain those 2 terms, hip extension and knee extension, so you can understand them. And then we'll look at how we can utilize the glute max to feel some activation there, and that's going to help you pattern a little bit more glute dominance and a little bit more hip dominance rather than using the knees to push you forward. So let's have a look at hip extension and knee extension. Knee extension is really simple. It's basically straightening of the knees. So if we're here, as the knees push back, we're going into knee extension. We're also going into knee extension when we kick and straighten the knee out there. So knee flexion is when the knee is bending. Knee extension is when the knee is straightening out. Hip extension, on the other hand, is coming up into this position where basically the knee is in line with the rib cage. What it is not is driving the hips forward. Yes, we are in hip extension there a little bit, but mainly we're borrowing extension from the lower back here to get this movement done. So when we pattern this, we want to be really careful that we're maintaining a fairly sort of flat neutral spine, so we are sure that we're not borrowing extension from the lower back. I'm going to use Linus here to demonstrate this. So Linus, if you come along. So what we want is the hip extension before knee extension. Another way to say it is we don't want the knee to completely straighten until it's past this line of the hip. You're going to feel really solid on this foot. You're going to have pretty much all of your weight balanced on that foot, and you're going to position your body such that the glute max really kicks on, and that's when it starts to, you're going to feel that firing up, okay? All right, cool. So let's get into position. Cool, so you can do this with a chair at home, and here are the cues that I want you to follow. We're going to do this on your left leg. So first I want you to stand on your left leg, meaning we pull the right leg off the floor. Cool, and now you can place that back right, around a foot sort of distance between the 2 feet. You can go back a little further. Where you were is good. And then we're going to take a soft bend in this left knee, perfect. And then we're going to hinge the torso forward quite a bit, but we're not going to arch here in the spine. We're going to stay a little bit round. So if you cue a little bit of posterior pelvic tilt, so if you were to, that's anterior tilt, we want to, yes. Posterior pelvic tilt is if your pelvis was a bowl of water. We want to tilt it so the water would kind of pour out the back there. So we're experiencing a little bit of roundness. Now maybe already you're starting to feel that glute kick on. Cool. That back pocket of the hip, that's what we want to be absolutely firing. So I want you to stay in that position. I want all of the weight pretty much to be on this leg such that we absolutely cook that glute. Keep cooking it for as long as you can. I want as much of the distribution of the weight to be really on that back pocket of the hip. And then when you can't handle this anymore, when you come up, I want you to keep that knee bent. Don't let it straighten at all, but I want you to force the hips forward. Don't straighten the knee. Don't straighten the knee. You feel that glute fire? Keep pushing, keep extending through the hip. Okay. So I want to take a second to explain this, because this is not an easy exercise. I workshop this live a lot of the time with my clients because it takes a little bit of kind of moving back and forth, which is why I did it with Linus here. You can see that he is, where is it? Here, when I give him the cue that he can't straighten his knee, just have a look at the strategy that Linus's body adopts to make the hips move forward. Let's just take a quick look at that, because when I take that cue away, when I keep that knee straight, he pretty much just extends through his lower back. Like he does get a bit of hip extension, but at the expense of kind of this pelvis dumping forward here a little bit and his belly coming out. So that's what I want you to keep an eye out for. You just have to practice it a little bit, but really, really keep that in mind, that we don't want to just dump through the lower back. And Linus is new to this. This is literally the first time he's doing the exercise. I showed it in 2 minutes before hitting record. So it takes a little bit of learning. It takes some observation and some proprioception, so understanding where your body is in space. But these are all very, very helpful things and helpful skills to accumulate as you get to know your body a little bit better. You can see that he is just shifting his hips a little bit to try and find that kind of perfect spot where the glute really fires. So I want you to really drive that foot into the ground, play with your hips a little bit. I don't want you to hike the hips. I don't want you to lift one pelvis higher than the other. What I do want you to do is tilt back and forward the pelvis to find that perfect spot. Then basically you're going to stay in that position, and like I say, just feel as much activation as possible. Don't lean too much on the trekking poles or the seat. Don't rely too much on the back foot, and stay there for as long as you can. Get a really good contraction, and then you can extend the hip. And be really careful here that you don't arch the lower back and just like dump your belly and your pelvis forward, because that is back extension, not hip extension. So it's a tricky one to get. I think if you practice it a little bit, you'll find that it'll get better and better and better. But this is not really an exercise, but it's a patterning drill to kind of teach your brain that you can use a little bit more glute. And like I said, it might take a little bit of working back and forth. It might take a little bit of practice, but stick with it and really try and get that good glute contraction. Whenever I'm working with someone, I like to get them to film their exercises and send them back to me so I can see what's moving and what's not moving. And a lot of the time when we get those parts of the spine and the hips to move and to express a deeper range of motion and to control that range of motion in space, we get very, very good results with improvements in the gait cycle, reduction in pain, and an improvement in just feeling better when you're hiking. So if you're interested in that, first link in the description, you can find out how to do coaching with me. Let's get back to the video. Let's try that again on the other side, just so everyone can get a little bit of a sense for it. Now that you've seen it happen, we'll get to experience it on the other side. So essentially what we're doing is we're in a single leg balance, and hiking is really just like a series of single leg balances, one after the other. And this is a big muscle, and we want that muscle to be doing the work. And we're teaching your brain to utilize the glute rather than relying on the calves and the quads all the time. If you wake up from a hike the next day and your quads are absolutely cooked, if your upper calf is absolutely cooked, I guarantee you that this is not working very well. And utilizing this little drill and this exercise will help your brain pattern a little bit more glute and help that glute to drive you forward and get more forward propulsion from that huge muscle, rather than relying on the knee to get you forward in space. So let's try that again. We'll get really solid on, that's probably a little bit too much knee bend, but you can experiment with it. Get really solid on that foot. We want to be about a foot distance away with that back left foot. We can maintain a little bit more knee bend. Basically, we're just looking to cook that glute. Posterior pelvic tilt helps there. And the other thing that really helps is if what we're trying to experience is length through the spine. So if you imagine that I'm there with you and I'm literally pulling your head away from your hips, I want you to send your hips back that way. I'm literally pulling Linus's head here and I'm trying to lengthen him out. So that's one cue that I want you to keep in mind. We want to make sure that we're not dumping through the lower back there, and you're not, which is really good, and you should be experiencing that back pocket of the hip now.
Yes,
cool.
Feeling it.
Good, good, good. So Linus is feeling it. I want you to be really heavy on this foot. If you're not finding that glute back pocket, what can really help is smash that foot into the ground as if you're driving away from the cops. You've got the accelerator on the ground, just smash it into the ground. We're going to get a lot of like really good foot activation and co-contractions from the foot to the glute. Now you should start to experience that. He's getting a little bit of Elvis leg here. So this is weakness leaving the body. This is really, really good. Keep cooking it. I want you to cook it for as long as you can. Linus is a cyclist, so he's probably going to be able to do this all day. But is that a similar feeling to what you experienced when you're...
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
It's when you're really going all out and you start feeling it.
That's what we want. So now I want you to really focus on keeping this knee exactly where it is in space. Maybe we'll get a little bit more knee bend. Now, I want you to absolutely cook it, smash that foot into the floor, and then when you can't hold it anymore, I want you to extend through the hips. So basically smash your hips forward, but keep the knee where it is. Keep driving it forward. Good, 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 good. Nice. A little bit of Elvis leg happening there. So, that's how you use your glutes.
Thank you.
But this can be a really useful drill just to pattern this into your body, right? And one way I like to explain this to people is when they're really, really tired, you'll often see hikers kind of, you know how you're kind of hunched over like this, maybe you got a backpack on, you're really tired, you're going uphill, which, you know, that's absolutely fine. But if you step up and you're kind of extending your knee like that to get you up, which I see a lot, that is a perfect example of what not to do, because we're relying on the knee solely to drive us forward in space. So that is a really good thing to keep in mind to avoid. If you notice that you're stepping up and you're hunched over and you're like, oh, I have to straighten my knee just to get myself up the mountain, we know then that you're going to be utilizing a lot of knee, a lot of quad, a lot of calf likely to do the work. And realistically, what we want is to distribute the load evenly through all of these structures. So rather than like 50% of the work being done with the knee, we want, 20% with the foot, 20% with the soleus and the calf, 20% with the quads, 20% with the glute, rather than the knee doing the vast majority of the work. So this is a very useful way to help pattern that. I utilize this as a teaching tool because many of the other exercises that we utilize in my training are just utilizing different ways to experience this hip extension before knee extension. And so it can be very useful to kind of pattern this as a way to get some practice. But you can also think about it when you're hiking as well. And one way you could do that is simply just thinking about a late knee bend. So not always extending the knee every time you step, maybe just keeping a soft knee bend, and literally try and get that same experience of that really cooked out glute feeling as you're stepping up. And if you can feel your glutes working, the likelihood is that you're going to be using a lot more glute and a lot more hip. You're going to be establishing hip dominance rather than knee dominance. So spend a couple of minutes and follow along, see if you can get that really cooked out feeling on the glute, and then also experiment with it when you're actually out hiking. I think every hike can be a learning experience. If you're kind of logging a little bit of a diary of what muscles you are experiencing delayed onset muscle soreness the next day, that is such a useful tool to see what muscles and what strategy your body is utilizing to get you up and down a mountain. That's all for this one. Thanks, Linus.
Thank you, Chase.
And I'll see you on the summit.